The morning sun rose over Maple Ridge Estates like a golden promise. It was a picture-perfect neighborhood. Manicured lawns, white fences, and mailboxes all standing in identical rows. Every home reflected the HOA's obsession with uniformity. It was beautiful and suffocating. When Sarah Langley bought her new home there, she saw something different. To her, Maple Ridge wasn't a cage of rules. It was an opportunity to live sustainably, to do something meaningful. As an environmental engineer, Sarah believed that small changes could ripple outward, and solar energy was the perfect place to start. Her house faced the sun perfectly, a wide southern roof ideal for capturing daylight. When the panels went up, they shimmered like black mirrors, glinting with silent potential. To Sarah, it was progress. To the HOA, it was defiance. Karen Mitchell, the HOA president, noticed the change almost immediately. To her, anything that didn't fit the community look was a threat. And when it came from a new resident, it felt personal. By the afternoon, she had filed a violation notice claiming unauthorized modifications. Sarah brushed it off at first, thinking it was a misunderstanding. But within days, the fines arrived. $100 for visual disruption. $200 for unapproved exterior alteration. The tone of each letter grew colder, more hostile. When Sarah attended her first HOA meeting to clarify the issue, she found herself facing not a group of neighbors, but a wall of control. Behind their smiles and polite nods was an unspoken rule. No one challenges Karen Mitchell. Sarah left that meeting knowing one thing. She wasn't just defending her solar panels. She was standing against something much larger. What she didn't yet know was that Karen's motives weren't just about appearances. They were about profit. And soon, the light Sarah had brought to her rooftop would start exposing the shadows behind the HOA's perfect image. The weeks that followed were a quiet war. Sarah's mailbox filled with threats. Her grass was suddenly non-compliant. Her driveway was unsightly. It was clear the HOA was targeting her. Yet Sarah stayed calm. She had built her career on analyzing systems. And this one had weaknesses. Late one night, unable to sleep, Sarah began researching. She combed through state laws and local ordinances about residential solar energy. That's when she discovered something shocking. State law protected homeowners' rights to install solar panels. The HOA's restrictions weren't just unfair, they were illegal. The next day, she printed every statute, every clause, and began building her case. But in doing so, she uncovered something even darker. Through public records, Sarah found that Karen's husband, Greg Mitchell, worked as a senior consultant for Brightline Energy, the local power utility that had been losing money as more homeowners switched to solar. The connection was too strong to ignore. Even stranger, the HOA's own aesthetic regulations had been recently amended to ban solar installations, citing reflection hazards. The amendment had no member vote, no public record. It had been pushed through quietly under Karen's leadership. It was corruption hidden behind bureaucracy. Sarah documented everything: emails, meeting minutes, and screenshots of HOA budgets showing mysterious consulting fees. Each discovery deepened the story. But the more she uncovered, the harder the HOA pushed back. The fines kept increasing. One morning, she woke to find a notice taped to her door. Final warning, legal action pending. The message was clear. They wanted to scare her into submission. But fear only strengthened her resolve. Sarah didn't plan to run. She planned to fight. And her next move would bring her straight into the lion's den, the HOA board itself. Sarah decided to attend the next HOA meeting, not as a frightened resident, but as a silent observer armed with facts. The community center was small but packed. Karen stood at the podium, her voice carrying over the crowd, polished and commanding. The meeting followed a familiar script: complaints about lawns, noise, and paint colors. But when the topic of unapproved solar installations came up, Sarah noticed the subtle exchange of glances among the board members. Guilt flickered in their eyes. She took notes, memorizing every comment. The words property value and visual harmony repeated like rehearsed lines. But behind the performance, Sarah sensed fear. Fear that someone had started to see through the facade. That night, She went home and began connecting dots. HOA funds had been used for community upgrades that never existed. The money trail led to small shell corporations, all registered under names tied to bright-line subcontractors. It wasn't just unethical. It was fraud. Sarah compiled her evidence into a digital folder titled Maple Ridge Scandal. She didn't know when she'd use it, but she knew she had something powerful. Karen, meanwhile, had grown desperate. Rumors were spreading that someone in the neighborhood was challenging her authority. She started sending newsletters filled with half-truths, claiming that solar panels posed safety risks and hurt property values. But whispers of corruption were spreading faster than her lies. Some neighbors began approaching Sarah quietly, offering words of support, sharing their own stories of HOA overreach. A movement was forming, one that even Karen couldn't control forever. Still, Sarah knew she needed more than rumors. She needed proof so undeniable it could topple Karen's entire operation. And soon she'd find it, buried deep in the HOA's own records. One evening, Sarah received an anonymous email. It contained a single sentence. Check the financial reports from 2019. You'll find what you're looking for. Attached was a link to a public archive of HOA documents. Sarah followed the trail, scanning through spreadsheets, contracts, and scanned invoices. Then she found it, a line item labeled Community Solar Impact Research Grant, totaling nearly $30,000, paid to a consulting firm named Mitchco Services. The contact listed Greg Mitchell. It was the smoking gun. The HOA was funneling money into companies controlled by Karen's husband, disguising them as research expenses. Sarah sat back, her heart racing. The corruption wasn't just about fines or panels. It was systemic theft from every homeowner in Maple Ridge. With the evidence secure, she knew the time had come to act. But she also knew Karen would fight tooth and nail to protect her power. So Sarah reached out to the local county office, filing a formal complaint supported by her documentation. Then she submitted copies to a state regulatory board and an investigative journalist who specialized in HOA corruption. Within a week, everything changed. The first sign of the storm came when a reporter's van appeared at the neighborhood entrance. Then came the questions, the cameras, the whispers spreading from one mailbox to another. HOA president under investigation for fraud, the headline read. The story exploded overnight. News outlets ran features, local residents spoke out, and suddenly the pristine image of Maple Ridge Estates was replaced by scandal. Sarah watched quietly from her porch as reporters gathered near Karen's house. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood. At the next emergency HOA meeting, Karen tried to maintain control, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But the state had already frozen HOA funds pending investigation. Greg Mitchell's company had been flagged for conflict of interest violations. For the first time in years, the board turned against her. One by one, members resigned. The illusion of order crumbled under the weight of truth. And through it all, Sarah stayed composed. She hadn't yelled, threatened, or broken a single rule. She had simply shined light where others hid in the dark. Months passed. The investigation concluded with a formal report. Karen Mitchell and her husband were found guilty of misusing HOA funds and violating state energy regulations. They were removed from their positions, fined heavily, and banned from any future community leadership. Maple Ridge Estates held new elections, the first fair ones in years. And when the results came in, the neighborhood made its choice clear. They wanted change. Sarah Langley was elected as the new HOA president by unanimous vote. Her first act was to rewrite the community charter, abolishing outdated restrictions and introducing a green initiative, encouraging residents to adopt solar energy, plant native trees, and reduce waste. The neighborhood transformed. Roofs once identical now sparkled with solar panels. Yards bloomed with life instead of manicured monotony. The same community that once punished progress now celebrated it. And at sunset, when the last rays of light danced across Sarah's panels, she stood on her porch with quiet pride. The fight had been long and lonely, but she had proven that one person, armed with truth and persistence, could change even the most rigid system. Maple Ridge Estates would never be the same again. And somewhere, in the warm hum of her solar-powered home, Sarah smiled, because the light had finally won.